Working as a gardener in a mansion, the man was shocked to realize that the millionaire's wife was his deceased wife. He approached. John tightened the straps of his worn leather work gloves as he approached the gates of the Dawson estate. The grandeur of the place was overwhelming. A sprawling mansion surrounded by perfectly manicured lawns, ornate fountains, and rows of vibrant flowers. It was the kind of place that spoke of old money and quiet power. John had worked in gardens before, but never in a place like this. The sheer scale of it made him feel small. Yet there was a sense of peace that always came with working among plants, and he hoped it would bring some solace to his weary heart. It had been 5 years since Mary's death. 5 long years since the tragic car accident that had ripped her from his life. Moving to this new town and taking this job as a gardener was supposed to be a fresh start, a way to find some peace in the simple routine of tending to the earth. But no matter how far he went, the pain followed him, lurking in the quiet moments, in the shadows of his thoughts. As John walked through the garden, taking in the various plants and flowers he would be caring for, a movement in the distance caught his eye. He squinted, the bright morning sun making it hard to see clearly. There, near a bed of roses, was a woman. Her back was to him, but there was something eerily familiar about her posture, the way she held herself. His heart began to race, a strange sense of déjà vu washing over him. He shook his head, chiding himself for letting his mind wander. It wasn't uncommon for him to see Mary in the faces of strangers, especially when his grief was at its heaviest. He had learned to dismiss it, a cruel trick of the mind that he had to endure. But as the woman turned slightly, catching the sunlight on her face, John froze. It was Mary. No, it couldn't be. Mary was gone. He had buried her, mourned her, tried to move on from her. But this woman, she was the spitting image of his wife. The same delicate features, the same way she tucked her hair behind her ear. John felt his heart hammering in his chest as he took an involuntary step forward, his mind racing with impossible thoughts. The woman, as if sensing she was being watched, turned fully towards him. Their eyes met, and John's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't just the resemblance, it was her. He could see it in the way she looked at him, a glimmer of recognition before she quickly turned away, as if startled by her own reaction. She composed herself almost immediately, her face becoming an unreadable mask. John wanted to call out to her, to ask her who she was, but his voice failed him. He watched in stunned silence as the woman walked gracefully towards the house, each step measured and deliberate. It was only as she reached the door that another figure appeared, a tall man with an air of authority and wealth that matched the surroundings. He placed a hand on the small of her back as they disappeared into the mansion together. The rational part of John's mind screamed that it was impossible, that he was seeing things, that grief had finally driven him mad. But the part of him that had loved Mary, that still loved her, wouldn't let go of what he had just witnessed. He stood there, rooted to the spot, his thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and desperation. Who was that woman? Why did she look so much like Mary? And more importantly, why did she look at him with that flicker of recognition, only to turn away? John knew he wouldn't find peace until he had answers. He had come here looking for a new beginning, but what he had found was a mystery that threatened to unravel everything he thought he knew. As the morning sun continued to rise, casting long shadows across the lawn, John made a silent vow. He would find out who this woman was. Whether she was Mary or not, he couldn't rest until he knew the truth. The day continued in a haze for John. Every flower he pruned, every bed of soil he tended, was done with his mind elsewhere, on the woman he had seen that morning. He couldn't shake the image of her face from his mind, nor could he dismiss the overwhelming familiarity of her presence. He knew grief could do strange things to a person, but this felt different. It wasn't just a fleeting moment of confusion. It was as if the past had reached out to him, bringing back someone he had lost forever. As he worked, John's thoughts kept drifting back to Mary. They had been married for 10 years before the accident, 10 years of love, laughter, and shared dreams. Mary had been his anchor, the person who made everything else in life make sense. Losing her had felt like losing a part of himself, and he had spent the last 5 years trying and failing to fill that void. He remembered the day of the accident with painful clarity. They had been driving home from a weekend trip, the kind they used to take often, just the two of them exploring new places. The weather had been clear, the roads dry. It should have been a safe journey. But then there was a sudden screech of tires, the flash of headlights, and everything went dark. John had woken up in the hospital, battered and bruised, to the devastating news that Mary hadn't survived. Now, as he relived those memories, John found himself questioning everything he thought he knew. If that woman in the garden was Mary, if there was even the slightest chance, then what did that mean about the accident? Had something been hidden from him all these years? Or was it more likely that his grief was warping his perception, making him see what he so desperately wanted to see? But it wasn't just her appearance that had shaken him. It was the way she had looked at him, even if just for a moment. There had been something in her eyes, a flicker of recognition, almost as if she had known him too. But why would she walk away? And who was that man with her? The one who had guided her into the house with such familiarity. As the day wore on, John decided he couldn't let this go. He needed to know more about the woman who resembled his wife so closely. He began asking subtle questions to the other staff members, trying to piece together what he could about her. Most of the workers referred to her as Mrs. Dawson, confirming what he had feared, that she was indeed married to Stephen Dawson, the wealthy owner of the estate. "She's a private woman," one of the gardeners told him as they worked side by side in a vegetable patch. "Keeps mostly to herself, doesn't interact much with us, just with Mr. Dawson. But she's always polite, always smiling." Another worker mentioned how she often spent time in the garden, tending to the roses, which were apparently her favorite. This detail struck John as oddly specific. Mary had loved roses too. It was one of the reasons he had taken up gardening after she passed, to keep that connection alive. Despite his questions, John couldn't get any real answers. No one seemed to know much about Isabella's past, only that she had appeared in Stephen's life a few years ago. It was as if she had just materialized out of nowhere, fully formed, without any history. This only deepened John's unease. It didn't make sense. Nothing about this situation did. That night, after finishing his work, John returned to the small cottage on the estate grounds where he was staying. The cozy space should have brought him comfort, but tonight it felt suffocating. He sat by the window, staring out into the darkness, his mind replaying every detail of his encounter with Isabella. Sleep didn't come easily. When it did, it was filled with fragmented dreams, flashes of Mary, the sound of her laughter, the feel of her hand in his. He dreamed of the accident again, the horrible moment when he had reached out for her and found only cold, empty space. But then the dream shifted. He was back in the garden, watching Isabella as she walked away from him, her figure fading into the distance no matter how fast he ran to catch up. John woke up in a cold sweat, his heart pounding. He couldn't keep doing this, couldn't keep questioning his sanity at every turn. But the alternative, accepting that Mary was gone and this woman was just a stranger, felt equally unbearable. As the first light of dawn broke through the window, John made a decision. He couldn't let his doubts fester. He had to confront them head-on. Whether Isabella was Mary or not, he needed to know the truth. It was the only way he could hope to find peace, one way or another. With renewed determination, John rose from his bed and prepared for the day. The mystery of Isabella was now something he couldn't ignore. He had to find out who she really was, even if the answers he found would change everything he believed about his past. John approached the garden with a new sense of purpose that morning. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft glow over the estate. The air was cool and still, the perfect time for reflection and quiet work. But today, John's mind was not on the flowers or the neatly trimmed hedges. His thoughts were consumed by the mystery of Isabella. He had spent the previous night considering how to proceed. Simply watching from a distance wasn't going to provide the answers he needed. He had to dig deeper, but without drawing attention to himself. If Stephen Dawson was as powerful and influential as everyone seemed to think, John knew he had to be cautious. One wrong move could put him in serious danger. Or worse, it could close off any chance he had of discovering the truth. John decided to start by observing Isabella's routine more closely. He noticed that she spent a lot of time in the garden, particularly near the roses. This gave him an opportunity to be near her without raising suspicion. He could work in the garden as usual, tending to the plants, while quietly observing her and trying to pick up on anything that might give him a clue. As he worked, John couldn't help but notice the way Isabella moved through the garden. There was a grace to her, a familiarity with the plants and flowers that struck him as odd. It was as if she knew this place intimately, yet she also seemed disconnected, like someone going through the motions without fully engaging with her surroundings. It reminded John of how Mary used to be when she was deep in thought or troubled by something. One morning, while pruning a bed of lavender near the rose bushes, John overheard a conversation between Isabella and another staff member. The staff member, a young woman who seemed to be one of Isabella's personal attendants, mentioned something about Isabella's reluctance to attend a social event Stephen was hosting that evening. "I just don't feel up to it," Isabella said, her voice soft but firm. "These gatherings always leave me drained." "Mr. Dawson will be disappointed," the attendant replied cautiously. "I know," Isabella sighed, "but I can't keep pretending to be someone I'm not." John's ears perked up at that. The way she said those words, with a hint of resignation, made him wonder if there was more to her story than he initially thought. Could she be hiding something? Or was she simply unhappy in her marriage to Stephen? As the days passed, John continued his quiet investigation. He made small talk with the other staff members, trying to gather more information about Isabella's past. Most of them had little to say, only that she had arrived at the estate a few years ago and had quickly become Mrs. Dawson. There was something odd about the way they spoke about her, as if they were all tiptoeing around something they couldn't quite put into words. One of the housekeepers, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Turner, was particularly tight-lipped. John had noticed that she was often around when Isabella was present, almost as if she were keeping an eye on her. He decided to strike up a conversation with her one afternoon while they were both in the kitchen. "Mrs. Turner," John began casually, "you've been working here a long time, haven't you?" She looked up from the dishes she was washing, her expression guarded. "Yes, quite a while now. You must know a lot about the Dawsons," John continued, keeping his tone light. "What can you tell me about Mrs. Dawson? She seems like a very private person." Mrs. Turner hesitated, her hands pausing in their work. "Mrs. Dawson is complicated," she said finally. "She's not like most people." John's curiosity was piqued. "What do you mean by that?" The housekeeper shook her head, clearly uncomfortable. "It's not my place to say. She's a good woman. Mr. Dawson takes care of her, that's all you need to know." But that wasn't enough for John. He needed more, something concrete that could either confirm or dispel his suspicions. He decided to take a different approach. He started looking for physical evidence, anything that might tie Isabella to Mary. Late one night, after the estate had quieted down, John returned to the garden. He remembered how Mary had a habit of leaving little things behind, an earring, a hairpin, sometimes even a note tucked away in an unexpected place. If Isabella really was Mary, maybe she had done something similar. He carefully searched the areas where Isabella often spent her time, particularly near the rose bushes. After a few minutes of combing through the soil and plants, his hand brushed against something small and metallic. He pulled it out and held it up to the moonlight. It was a silver locket. John's heart skipped a beat as he examined it more closely. The locket was old and tarnished, but the design was unmistakable. He had given Mary a locket just like this one on their first wedding anniversary. It was a simple piece of jewelry, but it had meant the world to her. She wore it all the time, only taking it off when absolutely necessary. His hands trembled as he opened the locket, revealing a tiny, faded photograph inside. It was a picture of them, taken on their honeymoon. Mary had always kept it close to her heart. There was no longer any doubt in John's mind. Isabella was Mary. She had to be. But how had she ended up here, married to Stephen Dawson, with no memory of her past life? And why did she look at him as if she didn't know him? The question swirled in John's mind as he clutched the locket tightly. He had found the proof he needed, but it only deepened the mystery. He knew now that he had to confront Isabella, to show her the locket and see if it triggered any memories. But he also knew that doing so could be dangerous, especially with Stephen Dawson watching his every move. John slipped the locket into his pocket and took a deep breath. He was closer to the truth than ever before, but the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty and risk. He would need to be careful, patient, and above all, determined. The woman he loved was still alive, but she was lost in a world of deception. It was up to him to bring her back. The next morning, John woke with a sense of urgency. He had spent the night thinking about the locket and what it meant. There was no doubt in his mind that Isabella was Mary. But now the challenge was figuring out how to approach her without alarming Stephen or causing her further distress. He knew he had to be careful. One wrong move could ruin everything. As he dressed and prepared for the day, John decided that he would try to engage Isabella in conversation, hoping to get closer to her and see if he could jog her memory. He would have to be subtle, not wanting to raise any suspicions. The locket, tucked safely in his pocket, was his only tangible connection to the truth, and he was determined to use it when the time was right. The day started like any other. John tended to the garden, working his way through the various tasks that needed to be done. He kept an eye out for Isabella, waiting for an opportunity to speak with her. It wasn't long before he saw her emerge from the mansion, wearing a light summer dress, her hair gently tousled by the breeze. She seemed lost in thought as she walked toward the rose garden, a place she frequented often. John waited until she was alone before making his way over to her. His heart raced as he approached, the locket in his pocket feeling like a heavy weight. He couldn't afford to mess this up. "Good morning, Mrs. Dawson." John greeted her with a warm smile as he reached the rose bushes. Isabella looked up, slightly startled by his presence, but she quickly composed herself. "Good morning, Mr. John," he replied, trying to keep his tone casual. "I'm the gardener here. I've seen you around the garden quite a bit. It's a beautiful place, isn't it?" She nodded, her eyes scanning the flowers absently. "Yes, it's lovely. I've always found peace among the roses." John felt a pang of familiarity at her words. Mary had always said the same thing. Roses were her favorite, a symbol of love and beauty. He decided to push a little further. "You know," he began, carefully choosing his words, "these roses remind me of a garden I once tended to, a long time ago. It belonged to someone very special to me. She loved roses too." Isabella's gaze flickered, and for a moment, John thought he saw a flash of recognition in her eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by a polite but distant smile. "Roses are timeless," she said softly. "They carry so many memories, don't they?" John felt a surge of hope. There was something in her voice, a hint of something deeper. He decided to take a small risk. "They do," he agreed. "In fact, there's one rose bush here that's particularly special to me. It's been through a lot, but it still blooms beautifully every year. Would you like to see it?" Isabella hesitated, her expression uncertain, but after a moment, she nodded. "I'd like that." John led her to a secluded corner of the garden where a single rose bush stood, its deep red flowers in full bloom. He watched her closely as she approached it, her fingers lightly brushing the petals. There was a softness in her movements, a gentleness that reminded him so much of Mary. "This rosebush," John said quietly, "was planted by someone I loved very much. She's gone now. But this rose reminds me of her every day." Isabella's hand froze on the rose, and she looked up at him, her eyes searching his face as if trying to understand something that was just out of reach. "Who was she?" Isabella asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Her name was Mary," John replied, his heart pounding. She was my wife." Isabella's eyes widened slightly, and for a brief moment, John thought he saw tears glistening there. But she quickly blinked them away, stepping back from the rosebush as if it had suddenly become too much to bear. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said, her voice strained. John could see the conflict in her eyes, the way she was struggling with something deep inside. He knew he was close, but he didn't want to push her too hard. He needed to be patient, to let her come to the realization on her own. "Thank you," John said gently. "It's been a long time, but some people, you never really lose them." Isabella nodded, but she didn't respond. Instead, she turned away, as if needing to escape the emotions that were threatening to overwhelm her. Before she could leave, John reached into his pocket and pulled out the locket. "There's something I want to show you," he said, his voice steady despite the anxiety coursing through him. She paused, looking back at him with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. John stepped closer and opened his hand, revealing the silver locket resting in his palm. "This belonged to Mary," he explained. "It was very dear to her. I found it here in the garden, and I thought you might want to see it." Isabella stared at the locket, her expression unreadable. For a moment, she didn't move, didn't speak. Then, slowly, she reached out and took the locket from his hand, her fingers trembling slightly as she turned it over. John held his breath, watching her intently. He knew this was a pivotal moment, a chance to finally break through the barrier that separated them. But before anything could happen, a shadow fell over them. John looked up to see Stephen Dawson standing at the edge of the garden, his expression dark and unreadable. "Isabella," Stephen called out, his voice sharp. "What are you doing out here?" Isabella quickly dropped the locket back into John's hand, her face turning pale. "I was just looking at the roses," she stammered, stepping away from John. Stephen's eyes narrowed as he glanced between them. "Come inside," he ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We have guests arriving soon." Isabella nodded, her demeanor shifting back to the composed, distant woman John had first seen. She gave John a quick, apologetic glance before hurrying toward the mansion. John watched them go, his heart sinking. Stephen's arrival had shattered the fragile moment they had shared, and he knew that getting close to Isabella would be even harder now. As he stood alone in the garden, John felt the weight of the locket in his hand, a reminder of the woman he had lost and the one he was desperately trying to save. The path ahead was uncertain, and the danger was growing, but he couldn't give up. He had to find a way to reach Isabella, to bring Mary back to him. With renewed determination, John slipped the locket back into his pocket and resumed his work. He would have to be more careful from now on, but he wouldn't stop until he had the answers he needed. The tension from Stephen's abrupt interruption lingered in the air long after Isabella and he had disappeared into the mansion. John remained in the garden, his mind racing with the events of the morning. The locket, now safely back in his pocket, felt like a lifeline, solid proof that Isabella was indeed Mary. But Stephen's presence had cast a long shadow over any hope John had of an easy reunion. It was clear that Stephen was suspicious, if not outright hostile, and that any misstep could have serious consequences. John knew he couldn't afford to wait any longer. He needed to find more evidence, something concrete that would help Isabella remember who she really was. The locket had almost worked. He had seen the flicker of recognition in her eyes, but he needed more, something that would trigger her memory fully. That evening, after most of the staff had gone home and the mansion was quiet, John decided to take a risk. He would search the house for anything that might connect Isabella to her past as Mary. He knew it was dangerous if Stephen caught him. It could mean the end of everything, but he was running out of time, and the risk was worth it. John made his way through the garden, keeping to the shadows as he approached the side entrance of the mansion. He had become familiar with the layout of the estate during his time working there, and he knew which parts of the house were less frequented at night. He slipped inside, the cool air of the mansion a stark contrast to the warm summer night. The halls were dimly lit, the only sound the soft ticking of an ornate grandfather clock somewhere in the distance. John moved quietly, his footsteps barely making a sound on the polished wooden floors. He needed to be quick, but thorough. He couldn't leave any stone unturned. He started with the ground floor, checking rooms that seemed less likely to be disturbed. An unused parlor, a study filled with dusty books, a formal dining room that looked as if it hadn't hosted a dinner party in years. But there was nothing, no sign of anything that might belong to Mary. Frustration began to creep in as he made his way upstairs. He had been hoping to find something, anything, that could give him a clue. But so far, the search had been fruitless. The mansion, with its grandeur and opulence, felt more like a labyrinth designed to keep secrets hidden. As he reached the top of the stairs, John paused to get his bearings. The upper floor was quieter, more isolated. He knew that Stephen's private quarters were here, along with Isabella's bedroom. This would be the most dangerous part of his search, but also the most promising. If there was anything of Mary's still in this house, it would likely be in one of these rooms. He started with a small sitting room adjacent to the master bedroom. The room was elegantly furnished, with plush armchairs and delicate lace curtains that filtered the moonlight. John searched the drawers of a small writing desk, finding nothing but old letters and stationery. He was about to move on when something caught his eye. A small ornate box on the table next to the window. John picked up the box, his heart pounding. It was locked, but the lock was old and simple. With a bit of effort, he managed to pry it open. Inside was a collection of small, personal items, a few pieces of jewelry, a faded photograph, and a bundle of letters tied with a ribbon. John's breath caught as he looked at the photograph. It was of Mary, no, Isabella, standing in what appeared to be the garden of the mansion. She looked younger, happier, but there was no mistaking that it was her. But something was different. In the photo, she was wearing the same locket that John had found in the garden. This was proof that the locket had belonged to her all along, that it wasn't just a coincidence. John carefully unfolded one of the letters from the bundle. The handwriting was delicate, almost familiar. As he read the words, a chill ran down his spine. "My dearest Mary," the letter began. "Every day with you is a gift, and I am endlessly grateful that you chose to be with me. I cannot imagine my life without you." The letter wasn't signed, but John didn't need to see the name to know who had written it. These were love letters, but they weren't from him. They were from Stephen Dawson. John's hands trembled as he read through the rest of the letters. They told a story of a relationship, of a man deeply in love with a woman he had come to call Isabella. But there were also hints of something darker, references to a past that Isabella couldn't remember, to a life she had supposedly left behind. Stephen had been manipulating her from the start, taking advantage of her memory loss to craft a new identity for her, one that suited his needs. John's anger boiled over as he realized the full extent of Stephen's deception. He had stolen Mary's life, her identity, and had tried to erase the love she and John had shared. But now, John had the proof he needed to confront Stephen, to force him to admit the truth and free Mary from his control. He carefully replaced the items in the box, his mind racing with what he had just uncovered. He couldn't confront Stephen directly, not yet. He needed to bring this evidence to Isabella first, to show her the truth and help her remember who she really was. Only then could they take down Stephen together. John slipped out of the room, the letters and photographs securely in his pocket. He made his way back downstairs, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. He knew that the next steps would be the most dangerous, but he was ready. He would save Mary, no matter the cost. As he exited the mansion and stepped back into the cool night air, John felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path ahead was treacherous, but he was closer to the truth than ever before. He had discovered the evidence he needed, and now it was time to act. The next morning, John could feel the weight of the evidence in his pocket as he prepared for what was to come. He knew that this was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment he would finally confront Isabella with the truth. But with that knowledge came a heavy sense of dread. There was no way to predict how she would react or what Stephen might do if he discovered their conversation. John had spent the early hours of the morning planning his approach. He needed to find a time when Isabella was alone, away from the prying eyes of Stephen or the household staff. After the previous day's encounter, he knew Stephen would be watching her more closely, making his task even more difficult. But John was determined to see this through, no matter the risks. As he worked in the garden, John kept an eye on the mansion, waiting for an opportunity. Finally, around mid-morning, he saw his chance. Stephen had left the estate for a business meeting, and Isabella had stepped out into the garden, looking thoughtful and somewhat distant. She wandered over to the rose bushes, the very place where they had spoken the day before. John wiped his hands on his trousers, his heart racing as he approached her. He couldn't afford to waste this opportunity. "Isabella," he called softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, her expression softening slightly when she saw him. "John," she greeted, her voice calm but tinged with something he couldn't quite place. Perhaps a lingering sense of the strange connection they had shared the day before. John hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "I need to talk to you. It's important." Isabella looked at him curiously, but she didn't move away. "What is it?" John reached into his pocket, his fingers closing around the photograph and the letters he had found. He pulled them out and held them towards her, his voice steady despite the anxiety he felt. "I found these in the house last night. I think you need to see them." She looked at the items in his hand, her brows furrowing in confusion. Slowly, she reached out and took the photograph, her gaze drifting over it. As she studied the image, her expression shifted from confusion to something deeper. Recognition, perhaps, or the faint stirrings of a memory long buried. "This is me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But when was this taken? I don't remember." John felt a pang of hope. "It was taken here, in this garden," he explained gently. "You were wearing the locket that I showed you yesterday." Isabella's fingers tightened around the photograph as if trying to hold on to the fragments of memory that were slipping through her grasp. "But how? I don't remember this. I don't remember any of it." John carefully placed the letters in her hands, watching as she unfolded the first one. He could see the tension in her posture, the way her breath hitched as she read the words. These were Stephen's letters, his lies, his manipulations, all laid bare in black and white. Isabella's face grew pale as she read, her eyes widening in shock. These are from Stephen, but he never told me any of this. Why would he keep this from me?" "Because he's been lying to you, Isabella," John said softly, taking a step closer. "He's been manipulating you, making you believe you're someone you're not. But you're not Isabella. Your name is Mary, and you're my wife." Isabella froze, the letters slipping from her hands as she stared at John, her expression one of utter disbelief. "What are you saying?" she whispered, shaking her head. "That can't be true. I've always been Isabella. I've always been with Stephen." John's heart ached at the confusion and fear in her eyes, but he knew he had to push forward. He took a deep breath, steadying himself before speaking again. "I know it's hard to believe, but it's the truth. There was an accident 5 years ago. You were in the car with me. They told me you died, but somehow you survived. Stephen found you, and he took advantage of your memory loss to create this new identity for you." "No, Isabella, no, Mary," murmured, her hands trembling as she clutched at her head. "No, that can't be true. I remember being with Stephen, living here. How can I be someone else?" John stepped closer, gently placing his hands on her shoulders. "Mary, please listen to me. I know this is overwhelming, but you have to trust me. I've been searching for you all these years, and now that I found you, I can't let you go again. You're my wife. We had a life together, a life that Stephen tried to take away from us." Mary's breath came in short gasps as she struggled to process everything he was saying. Her eyes darted around, as if searching for something to ground her in reality. "But I don't remember any of that. How can I be sure you're telling the truth?" John reached into his pocket one last time and pulled out the locket. He opened it, revealing the tiny photograph of the two of them on their honeymoon, young and in love, full of hope for the future. "Do you remember this?" he asked, his voice filled with emotion. "This was us, Mary. We were happy. We can be happy again, but you have to remember." Mary stared at the photograph, her eyes filling with tears. She reached out, her fingers trembling as she touched the image. I remember something," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "It's like a dream, or a memory, but it's so faint." John's heart soared. "That's it, Mary. You're starting to remember. Please, don't give up. We can figure this out together." But just as he thought he was reaching her, the sound of footsteps approached, heavy and determined. John looked up to see Stephen striding towards them, his face a mask of barely controlled anger. "What the hell is going on here?" Stephen demanded, his voice cold and authoritative. He glanced at the items in Mary's hands, his eyes narrowing dangerously. "What are you doing, Isabella?" Mary quickly pulled away from John, her expression torn between fear and confusion. "Stephen, Isabella, come with me," Stephen ordered, his tone brooking no argument. He shot John a venomous look, as if daring him to say another word. "We need to talk. Now." John's instincts screamed at him to protect Mary, to keep her from going with Stephen, but he knew he was outmatched. He couldn't force her to stay, not like this. He watched helplessly as Stephen took Mary by the arm and led her back toward the mansion, the evidence of his lies still clutched in her hand. John's heart sank as he realized that Stephen might still have the power to twist Mary's mind, to pull her back into the web of deceit he had spun. But he couldn't give up, not now. He had to believe that the truth would eventually set Mary free, that she would remember who she really was. As he stood alone in the garden, the roses around him seemed to wilt under the weight of his despair. But even in the darkest moments, a spark of hope remained. John knew that this wasn't the end. He would find a way to save Mary, even if it meant confronting Stephen again, this time with more than just words. He had taken the first step, and now there was no turning back. The battle for Mary's soul had begun, and John was determined to see it through to the end. John paced back and forth in the garden, his thoughts racing with worry and frustration. The confrontation with Stephen had not gone as planned, and now Mary was back inside the mansion, likely being fed more lies. Every instinct in him wanted to storm in after her, to tear down the walls Stephen had built around her mind. But he knew he had to be smarter than that. Rushing in without a plan would only push Mary further away and give Stephen more control. He needed help, someone who could assist him in uncovering more of Stephen's secrets. Someone who might know the inner workings of the Dawson estate better than he did. But who could he trust? The staff was loyal, either out of fear or respect, and most of them seemed to have no idea what was really going on. Then, it came to him, Mrs. Turner. The housekeeper had been with the Dawsons for years, and while she had been tight-lipped before, John had sensed something in her demeanor, as if she knew more than she was letting on. If he could just find a way to speak with her privately, perhaps she could provide the information he needed. Later that evening, when the mansion had quieted down and the staff had retired for the night, John made his way to the servants' quarters. The narrow hallways were dimly lit, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly. He found Mrs. Turner's room at the far end of the corridor and knocked softly on the door. After a moment, the door creaked open, and Mrs. Turner appeared, looking surprised to see him. "John? What are you doing here at this hour?" "I need to talk to you," John said, keeping his voice low. "It's important. Can I come in?" Mrs. Turner hesitated, her eyes narrowing slightly as she studied his face. Then, with a sigh, she stepped aside and allowed him to enter. The room was small and simple, but neat and tidy, reflecting the woman who lived there. "What's this about?" she asked, closing the door behind him. John took a deep breath, knowing he had to choose his words carefully. "Mrs. Turner, I know there's more going on in this house than meets the eye. I've seen things. I've found things that don't add up. I need your help to understand what's really happening here." Mrs. Turner's expression hardened, and she crossed her arms defensively. "I don't know what you're talking about, John. I'm just a housekeeper. I keep to my work and mind my own business." "I know you're more than that," John pressed gently. "You've been with the Dawsons for a long time. You must have seen things, heard things that don't make sense. Please, Mrs. Turner, I'm not asking you to betray anyone. I just need to know the truth. It's about Isabella, or rather, Mary." Mrs. Turner's eyes flickered with recognition at the name Mary, and John knew he had struck a chord. She looked away, biting her lip as if weighing her options. Finally, she sighed and sat down on the edge of her bed, motioning for John to take the chair nearby. "I don't know everything," she began cautiously, "but I've seen enough to know that Mr. Dawson isn't the man he pretends to be. There are things about Isabella, about Mary, that don't add up. I've known it for a while, but it's not my place to question my employer. Please, tell me what you know," John urged, leaning forward in his seat. Mrs. Turner nodded slowly, gathering her thoughts. "Isabella showed up here a few years ago, out of the blue. Mr. Dawson brought her home one day, introduced her as his fiancée, and within months they were married. But there was something off about her from the start. She didn't seem to know much about her own past, as if she had amnesia or something. Mr. Dawson was always very protective of her, almost to the point of being controlling." John listened intently, his heart pounding as Mrs. Turner continued. "I noticed that she didn't have any family or friends who visited, and she never talked about her life before coming here. It was as if she had no history, no past at all, and whenever she asked questions about herself, Mr. Dawson would change the subject or tell her not to worry about it. He was always so convincing, so smooth, that it wasn't hard for her to believe him." Mrs. Turner paused, her face troubled. "But there were times when I saw a different side of her, a side that seemed lost. She would wander the house at night, like she was looking for something, or she'd sit in the garden, staring at the roses for hours, as if trying to remember something important. I tried to talk to her once, to ask if she needed help, but Mr. Dawson always kept a close eye on her. It wasn't long before he made it clear that I should stay out of it." John felt a surge of anger and frustration. Stephen had been manipulating Mary from the start, keeping her in the dark about her true identity. But now that John knew the truth, he was determined to set things right. "Thank you for telling me this," John said, his voice thick with emotion. "It confirms what I suspected. Stephen has been controlling Mary, keeping her from remembering who she really is." Mrs. Turner's eyes softened with sympathy. "I always had a feeling something wasn't right. I'm sorry I didn't do more." "You've helped more than you know," John reassured her. "But I need to find out more. Something that will prove to Mary that Stephen's been lying to her." Mrs. Turner hesitated again, then nodded. "There is one thing. Something I've kept hidden, just in case. I don't know if it will help, but it's worth a try." She got up and went to a small cabinet in the corner of the room. From the back of a drawer, she pulled out a small, leather-bound journal and handed it to John. "This belonged to Isabella," Mrs. Turner explained. "Or rather, it belonged to Mary. She kept it hidden in her room, and I found it after she started acting more and more like the woman Mr. Dawson wanted her to be. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away, so I kept it safe." John took the journal, his hands trembling slightly as he opened it. The pages were filled with Mary's handwriting, notes, sketches, and diary entries that revealed her thoughts, her feelings, her memories. As he flipped through the pages, he felt a deep connection to the woman he had lost, a connection that had been buried under layers of lies and deception. "This is exactly what I needed," John said, his voice choked with gratitude. "Thank you, Mrs. Turner. This might be the key to helping Mary remember who she is." Mrs. Turner nodded, her expression somber. "Be careful, John. Mr. Dawson is a dangerous man, and he won't take kindly to anyone trying to interfere with his plans." "I will," John promised, clutching the journal tightly. "But I have to do this. I can't let him take Mary away from me again." With the journal in hand, John felt a renewed sense of hope and determination. He now had the evidence he needed to confront Stephen and to help Mary reclaim her true identity. The next step would be the most difficult, getting the journal to Mary without Stephen finding out. As John left Mrs. Turner's room and made his way back to the garden, he knew that the truth was within his grasp, but the battle was far from over. Stephen would not give up easily, and John had to be prepared for whatever came next. The path ahead was treacherous, but John was ready to face it. He had come too far to turn back now. The hidden truth was finally coming to light, and John would do whatever it took to bring Mary back to him, no matter the cost. John barely slept that night, his mind buzzing with the revelations Mrs. Turner had shared, and the journal now safely hidden in his room. The entries, written in Mary's familiar handwriting, were both a comfort and a source of deep sorrow. They were a window into the mind of a woman who had been lost for so long, manipulated into believing she was someone else. But they also represented hope that she could find her way back to who she truly was. As dawn broke, John knew what he had to do. He couldn't wait any longer. Every moment that passed was another moment Stephen had to reinforce his lies and tighten his grip on Mary. John needed to act, and he needed to do it soon. The challenge, however, was immense. He couldn't simply walk up to Mary and hand her the journal. Stephen's watchful eyes were everywhere, and the risk of being caught was too great. John needed a plan, a way to get the journal to Mary without raising suspicion. And once she had it, he needed to get her out of the mansion and away from Stephen's influence, but doing so would require careful timing and coordination. John decided to enlist the help of the one ally he knew he could trust, Mrs. Turner. She had already risked so much by keeping the journal and sharing what she knew, and John hoped she would be willing to help with the next steps. He would need her to create a distraction, something that would draw Stephen's attention away from Mary long enough for John to make his move. As the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, John sought out Mrs. Turner in the kitchen, where she was preparing breakfast for the household. He waited until the other staff members were out of earshot before approaching her. "Mrs. Turner," John began quietly, "I need your help again." She looked up from her work, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. "What do you need me to do?" John explained his plan, laying out the details with as much care as he could. He would give the journal to Mary during one of her walks in the garden, where she often spent time alone. Mrs. Turner's role would be to distract Stephen long enough for John to have a meaningful conversation with Mary and to get her out of the mansion. It would be risky, but it was the best chance they had. Mrs. Turner listened carefully, nodding as she absorbed each part of the plan. "I can create a diversion," she said after a moment. "There's a problem with one of the fireplaces in the study. It smokes badly and needs to be cleaned out. I can insist that Mr. Dawson attend to it right away. It's something he wouldn't want his guests to see." John smiled, grateful for her resourcefulness. "That could work. Thank you, Mrs. Turner. I don't know what I would do without your help." She gave him a small, tight-lipped smile. "Just promise me you'll be careful, John. If anything goes wrong." "I will," he assured her. "But we have to do this. We have to help Mary." With the plan set, John returned to his duties in the garden, waiting for the right moment to put everything into action. The hours passed slowly, each minute filled with a tense anticipation. He couldn't help but glance toward the mansion every few minutes, wondering if Stephen had any idea what was about to happen. Finally, the opportunity came. Late in the afternoon, John saw Mary step out of the mansion and head toward the rose garden, just as she often did when she needed time alone. John's heart pounded as he watched her walk among the flowers, her expression distant and troubled. This was it, his chance to reach her. He quickly retrieved the journal from his room and made his way to the garden, his mind racing with everything he wanted to say to her. As he approached, he saw Mrs. Turner heading toward the mansion, ready to initiate the distraction. John knew he had only a small window of time to make this work. "Mary," he called softly as he reached the rose bushes. She turned to face him, her expression softening slightly at the sight of him. "John, I've been thinking about what you said." John's heart leaped with hope. "I'm glad to hear that," he said, stepping closer. "There's something else I need to show you. It might help you remember." He pulled the journal from his pocket and held it out to her. "This is your journal, Mary. You wrote these entries before all of this happened. Please read them. They might help you remember who you really are." Mary hesitated, her eyes flicking between John and the journal. Slowly, she reached out and took it from him, her fingers tracing the worn leather cover as if it were something both familiar and foreign. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice filled with confusion and fear. "Why can't I remember any of this? Why did Stephen tell me I was someone else?" "Because he was afraid of losing you," John explained gently. "He took advantage of your memory loss to make you into the person he wanted you to be. But you're not Isabella. You're Mary, and you're my wife." Mary opened the journal, her eyes scanning the pages filled with her own handwriting. John watched as her expression shifted, first to confusion, then to recognition, and finally to something deeper, something that resembled the woman he had once known. "I remember, bits and pieces," she said, her voice trembling. "It's like waking up from a long sleep, but everything is blurry. I don't know what's real and what isn't." "It's real, Mary," John said, taking her hand in his. "You and I, we were real, and we can be again, but we have to leave. We have to get away from here." Mary looked up at him, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm scared, John. What if I can't remember everything? What if I'm too broken to go back to who I was?" John squeezed her hand, his voice filled with emotion. "You're not broken, Mary. You're stronger than you know, and no matter what happens, we'll figure it out together. But we have to go now, before Stephen realizes what's happening." Mary nodded, determination flickering in her eyes. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's go." Just as they turned to leave the garden, the sound of voices reached them, Mrs. Turner's voice, raised in concern, followed by Stephen's sharp, irritated response. The distraction had worked, but it wouldn't hold Stephen for long. John led Mary through a side path that would take them away from the mansion and toward the edge of the estate. They moved quickly but quietly, their hearts pounding with the urgency of their escape. The path ahead was uncertain, but they had each other, and that was enough for now. As they reached the outer gate of the estate, John felt a surge of relief. They had made it this far, but he knew the hardest part was still to come. Stephen wouldn't let them go without a fight, and they would have to stay one step ahead if they were going to succeed. But for the first time in years, John felt a glimmer of hope. Mary was with him, and together, they were free, at least for now. The gate creaked slightly as John and Mary slipped through it, leaving the grand estate behind them. The evening air was crisp, and the shadows were beginning to stretch long across the ground as the sun dipped lower in the sky. John kept a firm hold on Mary's hand as they moved quickly down a narrow, secluded path that led away from the mansion. The weight of the journal in Mary's grasp seemed to anchor her, giving her strength as they fled the only life she could remember. John's mind was racing, trying to think of the safest route to take them far from Stephen's reach. The town wasn't too far, but it would be risky to head there directly. Stephen had resources, and it wouldn't take long for him to mobilize a search if he discovered they were gone. They needed to find somewhere to lie low, at least for the night, and then figure out their next move. "We need to get to the old railway station," John whispered as they hurried along the path. "It's abandoned now, but there should be a place where we can stay hidden until morning. After that, we can catch the first bus out of town." Mary nodded, still clutching the journal to her chest. Her breath was coming in quick, shallow bursts, a mix of fear and adrenaline fueling her steps. John could see the strain in her eyes, the internal battle she was waging between the fragmented memories coming back to her and the reality she had been living as Isabella. He squeezed her hand reassuringly. "We're going to get through this," he promised. "Just a little further, and we'll be safe." The path wound through a wooded area, the trees providing some cover as they moved further from the estate. The sound of rustling leaves and the occasional call of a night bird were the only noises breaking the silence around them. But even with the natural cover, John couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that Stephen's presence loomed close behind them. As they approached the old railway station, John could see the dilapidated building silhouetted against the darkening sky. The station had been out of use for years, a relic of a time when the town had been a bustling hub of activity. Now, it was overgrown with ivy, the windows boarded up and the tracks rusted with age. It was the perfect place to hide, at least for a few hours. John led Mary to a side entrance, where the door hung slightly ajar, as if forgotten by time. They slipped inside, the musty scent of decay filling their nostrils as they moved through the darkened interior. The building was eerily quiet, the echoes of their footsteps bouncing off the walls. "Over here," John whispered, guiding Mary to a small room at the back of the station. It had once been the station master's office, and though it was dusty and filled with cobwebs, it offered some shelter and privacy. Mary sank into an old, worn chair, her hands still gripping the journal. John knelt beside her, his heart aching at the sight of her distress. She was strong, but the events of the day had clearly taken their toll on her. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I don't know," Mary admitted, her voice trembling. "It's all so confusing, John. Everything feels so distant, like I'm watching someone else's life through a fog." John nodded, understanding her turmoil. "I know it's hard, Mary, but you're doing great. You're remembering more and more each day, and we'll take it one step at a time. The important thing is that we're together now." Mary's eyes filled with tears, but she managed a small smile. "Thank you, John. I don't know what I'd do without you." "You don't have to worry about that," John said, his voice filled with emotion. "I'm not going anywhere. We're in this together." For a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. John knew they couldn't stay here long. They needed to rest and regroup, but they also needed to keep moving, to stay ahead of Stephen. "Get some rest," John suggested, standing up and glancing around the room. "I'll keep watch." Mary nodded, leaning back in the chair and closing her eyes, though John could tell sleep wouldn't come easily. He moved to the doorway, peering out into the darkened station. Every creak, every rustle outside made him tense, ready to act if necessary. Time passed slowly, the minutes stretching into hours as the night deepened. John's thoughts wandered to what might come next. They needed to get out of town, to find a place where Stephen's influence couldn't reach them. But where could they go? How far would they have to run before they were truly safe? Just as John was starting to plan their route for the next day, a noise from outside made his heart skip a beat. It was faint at first, a distant rumble that grew louder with each passing second. He strained to listen, and then he realized what it was. The sound of approaching vehicles. John's pulse quickened. There was no reason for anyone to be at the old station at this hour, unless they were looking for someone. He quickly turned back to Mary, who had sat up, her eyes wide with fear. "We need to go," John whispered urgently. "Stephen's men. They're here." Mary scrambled to her feet, clutching the journal tightly as John led her out of the room and back through the station. They needed to find another way out, a back exit or a window they could use to escape. The sound of the vehicles grew closer, and John knew they only had moments before the men started searching the building. They found a small, broken window at the rear of the station, partially hidden by overgrown bushes. John helped Mary climb through first, then followed, wincing as the glass scratched his arms. They landed in a tangle of weeds, the station looming behind them like a dark shadow. "Come on," John urged, grabbing Mary's hand and pulling her toward the nearby trees. They needed to disappear into the woods, to put as much distance between themselves and the station as possible. They ran, their breaths coming in ragged gasps as they pushed through the underbrush. John's mind raced as he tried to think of their next move. They couldn't go back to the town, not with Stephen's men so close. They needed to head for the highway, where they could hitch a ride out of the area. The sound of voices and footsteps echoed behind them, the men clearly on their trail. John pushed Mary forward, urging her to keep moving despite the exhaustion that was clearly setting in. "We're almost there," John panted, though he wasn't entirely sure where there was, just a little further. Finally, they broke through the trees and onto a small dirt road that led toward the main highway. John could see the faint glow of headlights in the distance, and he knew it was their only chance. As they reached the road, a pair of headlights appeared, heading toward them. John waved his arms frantically, hoping the driver would stop. To his immense relief, the car slowed and pulled over to the side of the road. A man rolled down the window, looking at them with concern. "Are you folks okay? You look like you've been running from something." "We have," John replied breathlessly. "We need to get out of here. Can you take us to the next town?" The man hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Get in. I'll take you as far as I can." John helped Mary into the back seat, then climbed in beside her. As the car pulled away, he glanced back at the woods, half expecting to see Stephen's men emerging from the trees. But all he saw was darkness. As they drove away from the station, John felt a surge of relief. They had escaped. For now. But he knew they weren't safe yet. Stephen would keep searching, and they would need to stay on the move if they wanted to stay ahead of him. Mary leaned against John, her exhaustion finally catching up with her. He wrapped his arm around her, holding her close as they sped down the road, away from the danger that had nearly caught them. "We'll find a place," John murmured, more to himself than to Mary. "Somewhere safe, where we can start over." Mary didn't respond, already half asleep in his arms. But John knew she trusted him, and that was enough to keep him going. As they drove through the night, John's thoughts turned to the future. They still had a long way to go, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a glimmer of hope. They had made it this far, and as long as they were together, they could face whatever came next. The car sped down the highway, leaving the small dirt road and the looming threat of Stephen's men behind. John kept his arm protectively around Mary as she rested against him, her breathing slow and steady. The rhythmic hum of the tires against the asphalt and the gentle sway of the car were a stark contrast to the chaos they had just escaped. The driver, a kind middle-aged man named Bill, kept his eyes on the road but glanced at them occasionally in the rearview mirror, his expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. "You folks in some kind of trouble?" he asked gently, his tone cautious. John hesitated for a moment, unsure of how much to reveal. "You could say that," he finally replied. "We're trying to get away from someone who means us harm." Bill nodded, seeming to understand without needing further details. "Well, you're safe with me for now. I can take you to the next town. There's a small motel there where you can lay low for a while." "Thank you," John said, his voice filled with gratitude. "That's exactly what we need." The rest of the drive was silent, the weight of their situation pressing down on them like a heavy blanket. John's mind raced with plans and possibilities. They had managed to escape, but Stephen would undoubtedly be looking for them. They needed a more permanent solution, a way to disappear completely and start anew. As they approached the next town, the lights of the motel came into view, a beacon of temporary safety in the darkness. Bill pulled into the parking lot and cut the engine, turning to face them. "This is it," he said quietly. "I'll pay for your room. It's the least I can do to help." John's heart swelled with gratitude for the stranger's kindness. "Thank you, Bill. You've done more for us than you know." Bill waved off the thanks with a humble smile. "Just be careful, all right? Whatever trouble you're in, I hope you find a way out of it." John nodded, helping Mary out of the car and thanking Bill once more before they made their way to the motel office. After checking in under false names, they were given a small, modest room at the back of the building, away from prying eyes. Inside the room, Mary collapsed onto the bed, the exhaustion of the day finally catching up with her. John sat beside her, feeling the weight of the journal in his pocket. He knew they needed to go through it again, to help Mary piece together her memories. But he also knew she needed rest. "Mary," he said softly, brushing a hand through her hair. "We're safe here, at least for tonight. I want to go through the journal with you when you're ready. I think it will help you remember more." Mary looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. "I want to remember, John. I do. But I'm scared of what I'll find." John's heart ached at her words, but he knew she needed to face her past to truly reclaim her identity. "I'll be with you every step of the way," he promised. "You don't have to do this alone." She nodded, taking a deep breath as if steeling herself for what was to come. "Okay, let's do it." John retrieved the journal from his pocket and handed it to her. Together, they sat on the bed, the journal open between them. Mary began to read aloud, her voice trembling at first but growing steadier as she delved deeper into the entries. The first few pages were filled with mundane details, notes about daily life, sketches of flowers, and observations about the world around her. But as they continued, the entries became more personal, more introspective. Mary had written about her hopes and dreams, her fears and insecurities, and most importantly, her love for John. "I remember this," Mary whispered, her fingers tracing a particular entry. "I wrote this after our first anniversary. We had gone to the lake and you surprised me with a picnic." John smiled, the memory coming back to him vividly. "You were so happy that day. We spent hours just talking, watching the sunset." Mary's eyes filled with tears as she continued to read, the memories slowly coming back to her. She could see herself in those words, feel the emotions she had once felt so strongly. But there was also a deep sense of loss, as if she had been robbed of something precious. "Why did this happen to us, John?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why did Stephen do this?" John shook his head, his own heart heavy with the weight of their shared pain. "I don't know, Mary, but we're going to get through this. We're going to rebuild our life together." They spent the next few hours going through the journal, each entry unlocking another piece of Mary's past. Slowly, the fog began to lift, and Mary's true self started to emerge from the shadows of the identity Stephen had imposed on her. When they reached the final entry, Mary closed the journal and looked at John, her expression resolute. "I remember who I am," she said, her voice filled with a quiet strength. "I'm Mary, your wife, and I'm not going to let Stephen take that away from me ever again." John felt a surge of relief and pride at her words. "That's right," he said, taking her hands in his. "We're going to face whatever comes next, together." Mary nodded, her resolve firm, but as they sat there, the reality of their situation settled over them once more. They couldn't stay in this motel forever. Stephen would continue to hunt them, and they needed to find a way to stop him for good. "We need to go to the authorities," John said after a moment of silence. "We need to expose what Stephen has done. It's the only way to protect ourselves and to bring him to justice." Mary looked hesitant, the fear of confronting Stephen still lingering in her eyes. "But what if he finds us first? What if he uses his influence to cover everything up?" John squeezed her hands reassuringly. "We'll be careful. We'll gather as much evidence as we can, your journal, the letters, anything that proves what he's done, and we'll go to the police. They can protect us, and they can make sure Stephen pays for what he's done." Mary took a deep breath, her fear slowly giving way to determination. "You're right. "We can't keep running forever. It's time to take a stand." John nodded, feeling a sense of resolve settle over him. They had come this far, and now it was time to finish what they had started. They would take down Stephen Dawson, no matter the cost, and reclaim the life that had been stolen from them. As they lay down to rest, the journal safely tucked away, John wrapped his arms around Mary, holding her close. They had a long road ahead of them, but they were ready to face it together. The night passed quietly, the calm before the storm that was sure to come. But as John drifted off to sleep, he felt a sense of peace for the first time in years. They were no longer lost in the shadows of the past. They were moving forward, step by step, toward a future that was theirs to reclaim. The first light of dawn filtered through the thin curtains of the motel room, casting a soft glow over the room. John awoke with a start, his senses immediately alert. The events of the previous day came rushing back, and he instinctively reached out for Mary. She was still beside him, sleeping peacefully, her breathing steady and calm. For a moment, John allowed himself to just watch her, marveling at the strength she had shown and the courage it had taken to reclaim her identity. But the day ahead would not be easy. They had made the decision to go to the authorities, to bring Stephen to justice, and that meant confronting everything they had been running from. John knew they needed to move quickly before Stephen had a chance to catch up to them. Carefully, John slipped out of bed, trying not to wake Mary. He needed to plan their next steps, where they would go, how they would present their case, and what evidence they needed to ensure that Stephen couldn't simply talk his way out of it. As he gathered their belongings, Mary began to stir. She opened her eyes slowly, blinking away the remnants of sleep. When her gaze met John's, she gave him a small, determined smile. "Today's the day," she said softly, her voice steady despite the undercurrent of nerves. John nodded, crossing the room to sit beside her. "Yeah, we're going to end this, Mary. We're going to make sure Stephen can never hurt anyone again." Mary sat up, her expression serious. "I've been thinking, we need to be smart about this. Stephen has connections, and he'll try to use them to his advantage. We need to have everything in order before we go to the police. I don't want to leave any room for doubt." "You're right," John agreed. "We have the journal, the letters, and your memories. But we need something more. Something that ties him directly to his crimes. We need to think of anything we might have missed." Mary frowned, deep in thought. "There's one thing. Something Stephen kept in his study. He was always so secretive about it. I never knew what it was, but it might be important. If we can get our hands on it, it could be the key to bringing him down." John's mind raced as he considered the possibilities. "Do you remember where he kept it? If we could find it." "It was in a locked drawer in his desk," Mary recalled. "He always kept the key on him, but I've seen him hide a spare in the bookcase behind his desk. If we can get back to the estate, we might be able to retrieve it before Stephen realizes we're there." The thought of returning to the mansion made John's blood run cold, but he knew Mary was right. This might be their only chance to secure the evidence they needed to put Stephen away for good. "Okay," John said, determination filling his voice. "We'll go back to the estate, get the evidence, and then head straight to the police. We'll need to be quick and careful, but we can do this." Mary nodded, her resolve mirroring his. "Let's finish this." They left the motel under the cover of early morning, moving swiftly and purposefully. The drive back to the estate was tense, the weight of what they were about to do pressing down on them. But they knew it was the only way to ensure their safety and to bring justice to the man who had caused so much pain. As they approached the estate, John parked the car in a secluded spot, hidden from view. The mansion loomed in the distance, its grandeur now a stark reminder of the darkness that lurked within its walls. They moved carefully, keeping to the shadows as they made their way toward the side entrance. The house was quiet, the staff likely still in the early stages of their morning routines. John and Mary slipped inside, moving silently through the familiar hallways. The tension was palpable, each creak of the floorboards sending a jolt of anxiety through them. They reached Stephen's study, the door slightly ajar. John pushed it open cautiously, peering inside. The room was empty, just as they had hoped. The large mahogany desk sat in the center, a symbol of Stephen's power and control. But today, that power would be dismantled. Mary quickly moved to the bookcase, her fingers deftly searching behind the books until she found the hidden key. She handed it to John, her hand steady despite the fear in her eyes. John took it, his heart pounding as he approached the desk. With a soft click, the lock on the drawer released. John opened it carefully, his breath catching as he saw what lay inside. It was a folder, thick and filled with documents. John quickly pulled it out, flipping through the pages. His eyes widened as he realized what he was holding. "These are financial records," John whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. "They show everything. Stephen's illegal deals, the money he's been funneling, the people he's been paying off. This is the proof we need, Mary. This ties him to everything." Mary looked over his shoulder, her expression hardening as she saw the evidence laid out before them. "This is it, John. This is what we need to bring him down." But before they could react further, a shadow fell across the room. John looked up, his blood running cold as he saw Stephen standing in the doorway, his face twisted in a mask of fury. "What do you think you're doing?" Stephen snarled, his voice low and dangerous. John quickly stood, positioning himself between Stephen and Mary. "It's over, Stephen. We have everything we need to take you down. You're not getting away with this." Stephen's eyes flicked to the folder in John's hand, his expression darkening further. "You think you can just walk out of here with that and ruin me? You're a fool, John. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Mary stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "You've taken everything from me, Stephen. You stole my life, my memories, and tried to make me into someone I'm not. But I remember now, and I'm taking my life back. You're going to pay for what you've done." Stephen's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, John feared he might lash out. But then Stephen's expression shifted, a cold, calculating look settling over his features. "You think you've won, don't you? But you'll never make it to the police. I'll make sure of it." John knew they were running out of time. They needed to get out of there, and fast. He grabbed Mary's hand, pulling her toward the door. "Run, Mary, now!" They bolted from the room, the sound of Stephen's enraged shout echoing behind them. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly as they ran, the pounding of their footsteps matching the frantic beat of John's heart. He didn't dare look back, didn't want to see how close Stephen was. They burst through the side entrance and into the daylight, the fresh air a stark contrast to the suffocating tension inside. John didn't stop, dragging Mary toward the car. They could hear Stephen's footsteps behind them, growing louder with each passing second. They reached the car and John fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking with adrenaline. Finally, he managed to unlock the door, and they scrambled inside just as Stephen emerged from the mansion, fury etched into every line of his face. John started the engine, the tires screeching as they sped out of the driveway. Stephen's shouts faded into the distance as they tore down the road, the mansion disappearing behind them. John drove as fast as he could, the folder of evidence clutched tightly in Mary's hands. They were finally free, but the danger wasn't over. They needed to reach the police, to hand over the evidence before Stephen could find a way to stop them. The drive to the police station felt like an eternity, but finally, they pulled into the parking lot. John's heart pounded as they rushed inside, the folder held between them like a lifeline. They approached the front desk, breathless and desperate. "We need to speak to someone," John said urgently. "We have evidence of serious crimes, please. We need help." The officer at the desk looked up, his expression turning serious as he saw the state they were in. "Come with me," he said, leading them to a private room where they could speak with a detective. They laid out everything: the journal, the letters, the financial records, explaining Stephen's manipulation and the lengths he had gone to cover up his crimes. The detective listened intently, his expression growing darker with each revelation. "This is serious," the detective finally said, his voice grave. "We'll need to act quickly. I'll get a warrant for Stephen Dawson's arrest. He won't be able to run from this. John and Mary exchanged a relieved glance, the weight of their ordeal finally beginning to lift. They had done it. They had brought Stephen to justice. And now, they could finally start to rebuild their lives, free from the shadows of the past. As they left the police station, hand in hand, John felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. Mary was beside him, her memories and her strength fully restored. Together, they had faced the darkness and emerged stronger on the other side. The future was theirs to reclaim, and they would face it together, with the knowledge that love and truth could conquer even the deepest betrayals.